going to be talking about Sarah Perkins. So, Sarah Perkins received her bachelor's from San Diego State University and her master's from Southern Illinois University, and currently she works as professor emeritus at Missouri State University. She is a complete expert when it comes to enameling. She's pioneered a lot of unconventional enameling techniques and the way people see enamel in general with relation to metal. She mainly works with a lot of hollowware forms like bowls or closed containers with finer enameling details. Here are examples of her work. You can see a lot of the fine enameling details she likes to employ, such as subtle gradation or including motifs like smaller ellipses or pearls or speckles or creating texture itself with the enamel and playing with the color. Here's more of her work with a lot of abstract circles and lines, and more gradation as well. And here are some of the bowls she's worked on, which have a lot of texture and that same gradation throughout. So, the significance of her work, she makes her pieces entirely by hand and keeps all the imperfections in them, including drill holes, asymmetry. She feels it adds to the energy and the general vibe of the pieces. I think this is interesting because I wouldn't have known this if I didn't research it. Her pieces are so well made that it honestly looks like a machine had a part in or had help in helping her make or create these pieces because they are just so well refined. So I think that's really interesting and adds a lot. Her work is significant because instead of focusing on using the enamel to cover up or hide the metal, or just using it as like, oh, this is a base, and I'm going to use the enamel to cover up the metal entirely, she wants to treat them as equals and have the metal disrupt the enamel. You can see this consistently throughout most of her work, where there is a strong line of metal going through the entire piece that's difficult to miss. Especially in the lips of her pieces, I feel like you can really see that. And honestly, I think it adds to her work and reminds the viewer, hey, this is a piece made out of metal. She also uses a lot of unconventional enameling techniques like mixing opaque and transparent colors, fusing smaller enamel threads by pulling molten enamel across her room, and finishing pieces with dry enamel. I actually did not know you could mix opaque and transparent colors, which I thought was super cool. I didn't know what the result of that would be, but clearly it's resulted in a lot of interesting textures and patterns, as you can see throughout her works. And she challenges the notion that enamel has to be quote unquote pretty. Here's my analysis. I think her work is extremely interesting in the way it mirrors traditional ceramic pieces, at least for me. I used to work with ceramic pieces in my senior year of high school, and honestly, I found it pretty cumbersome. Glaze takes weeks to fire, obviously, and ceramic itself is so delicate, and you could lose your piece at any time if you just accidentally knock it over, and you lose weeks or even months of really hard work. And even throughout the process of creating a finished ceramic piece, your piece could explode in the kiln, or the glaze could fire improperly, and you end up with a really matte brown covered piece. Um, I didn't even know enameling metal was a thing until this class, and I like it a lot better. I know I have a respect for a lot of ceramicists that glaze, but I just think enameling is better. Sorry. And I like how she pushes the boundaries of what is considered a traditional metal piece. I feel like when you mention you do metalsmithing to someone, they are more akin to think about something related to maybe like blades or something where the metal is more explicitly exposed. I feel like when you mention metalsmithing, you don't really think of a vase like or a ceramic like form, and you probably don't think of enameling. I don't know if most people know what enameling is outside of the metalsmithing sphere, so I thought that was super cool. Um, I like how she really pushes the boundaries of that, and she spends so much time on her pieces. On average, she enamels her pieces, 25 to 30 times, so she really takes her time to make sure the color comes out the way she wants. Um, but the juxtaposition with using such what is considered a really rough and hard material and creating what seems like a very delicate object reminds me of my high school ceramics teacher. He would take it was kind of the opposite, where he would take such a delicate material and make forms like batteries and beer cans and gas cans out of clay, which I feel like created a really interesting dynamic. Here's some other practitioners that also tie into Perkins' work. Here's Harlan, obviously, all his quotes around the enameling room. He also makes a lot of hollowware forms out of metal that are covered with enamel. Him and Perkins have a lot of complex illustrations on their forms. Um, Harlan clearly has the lightning bolts here and like a landscape, but looking through a lot of Harlan's work, he has a lot of text when it comes to the lip or maybe the bottom of a project that I feel helps tell a story that also kind of helps separates him and Perkins' work as well. I have not seen any form of text or lettering on his work or Perkins' work, so I think it's cool that Harlan includes it in his work. Here's Jessica Calderwood. She also makes metal forms with covered enamel, and she uses dry enamel to create texture in her pieces. However, she does focus on more sculptural elements. I did not personally see a lot of hollowware forms. She mainly creates very abstract sculptural forms like a hard rain, with a lot of metal and enamel. And lastly, we have Tom Moore. He doesn't necessarily work with enamel, but he does work with a lot of sculptural, mainly abstract metal forms. Here you can see twin risers and the little mustache he made. I feel like going back to Perkins' work, I'm going to reference her jellyfish container. It's definitely reminiscent of a jellyfish, but it's not the exact form of a jellyfish. That's kind of what Mirror's work reminds me of. It's not exact, but it does capture the vibe. Um, he also works with sculptural metal forms. I guess that also ties into Jessica Calderwood a little bit too. And his work also involves forms that also reject traditional beauty or also very abstract. But yeah, thank you.